And California is one of the top 10 economies, and it has been since the late 1970s. California is the only place in the planet that's what's called a sub-governmental unit that's a G10 country. So that's what we always point out to people. There's no place on earth where a little section of a country is a member of the G10. Everyone else is a country. Every single member of the G20 is a full-on independent country, full-blown. We're the only sub-governmental unit where we have to go, okay, I'll be in the G10, but I also have to ask this other big brother for permission to do whatever I want.
Hi, everyone. My name is Esteban. This is the Founders Frequency Podcast out of Lindsay, California. I'm very happy to introduce Mark Ruiz Evans. Is it Mark or Marcus?
Whatever you pick. I'll even go by Marcos.
Okay. Yeah, sounds good. I may throw in all three names every once in a while.
You might. Hey, let's Latin it up.
Right? Well, thank you for coming today. Really appreciate it. So we have Marcus here, and Marcus is the leader of the Calexit movement. If you don't know what Calexit is, it's kind of taking the naming conventions of Brexit when Britain, the UK, left the European Union, right? So it's really, the naming conventions are similar, but our situation and California itself as a polity is very different than the UK. And we can get into that as well. And I'm sure we're going to get into the economy comparisons. And
I hope so.
Yeah, it's going to be awesome. So just wanted to give you a chance to introduce yourself and let us know who you are first before we get into any of the policy or any of the reasons why you're supporting this movement for secession from the United States. I just want people to know who you are first. So tell us about yourself, your hobbies, favorite food, favorite restaurant here in the Central Valley, if you would like, early life, if you like. I'll let you take the floor.
Thank you for letting me be on. It's awesome to be on a Central Valley-based created publication. I remember when I published my book, they said, publish it out of LA or the Bay Area. And I said, no, I'm going to publish it out of Fresno because I want people to know that I'm from the Valley. Every publisher said, don't do that. I did that to make a point. So I totally support you basing things out of the Valley. Also like to see young Latin people getting into politics. There's frankly not enough of us at the intellectual level at this level. And I saw your first episode and you're starting to do it. We're not typically seen as intellectual partakers in political science or the political realm. And I'm glad to see people like you jumping into it. It's good. I remember when they said, we were good for mowing lawns, but not much else. Anyways, my name is Marcus Ruiz Evans. I go by Mark, or you could also go Marcos. I'm Latin. My father's Caucasian, but technically I grew up on the Mexican side. Spanish was spoken in the house. My grandfather came illegally. He was here undocumented. I was always raised to be proud of that. He was not a criminal or a bad person. He came and he started a business and then employed people in the community, and he helped out local kids who weren't Latin. So that's the experience that I have with undocumented people, is that they come, work hard, and they're part of the American experience. Just like the Italian immigrants who came before and nobody ever asked for paperwork for them. Anyways, born here, from the Valley, born and raised, went to all Valley schools, First Church Christian School, Valley First Christian Academy. Not really religious, but I did go to those schools. And then college. Parents are both moved here. My mom moved here from Texas. My dad moved here from Oklahoma. There's a lot of Okies here in the Valley. I'm part Okie and part Mexican, which is very Central Valley. We have a very diverse mix, but it's a unique, diverse mix. Very Armenian, very Japanese, Greek. So I'm proud to be technically Okie Latin, which is a specific mix you find almost nowhere else on earth outside of the Central Valley. Here it's ubiquitous. My biological father was Caucasian, but he spoke Spanish fluently. That barely happened in the 1970s. It's still kind of unique today, but in the 70s, that was almost unheard of. And he speaks better Spanish than my mom. My mom originally is Tejano, or she was at Tejana. So she came from Texas. They left Texas because of racism. Mexican people were treated like dogs in Texas. In my opinion, they still are, but I have cousins who disagree with that. They came here, and my mom and all my aunts and my grandma, they really couldn't get good jobs or go anywhere or do anything in Texas. And then all of them came to California and became top corporate heads and the highest ranking females in the corporate America. They were all part of Fortune 500 companies, and they were all the highest ranking Latin person and all the highest ranking females, and certainly therefore the highest ranking Latinas. One was for a German insurance company. My other aunt met Warren Buffett. My other mom worked for Fortune 500, one of the top, I think, 30 agriculture companies. And so, you know, for me, the story was personal, was that they were treated like dogs in Texas, and it's still okay to be racist in Texas, and they wouldn't have had much going on. And when I went to go visit my cousins in Texas, so stereotypical Mexican, I have 3,000 cousins in one city called Dumas, Texas. And if you go there, half of them look like me. It's a little bit outside of Amarillo, which is pronounced Amarilla. So that's honor to my cousins. And they're all called Toby. I don't know why. But if you go to Dumas and you go, I want to talk to Toby, they'll go, you mean cousin Toby? And because they're Latin, but they have the Texas drawl. So it's yeah. So anyways, you know, I went out there and they were showing me what all my cousins were doing and all my aunts and uncles. And the best they could do in Texas was work in the gas field, 15 hours a day covered in dirt. And here my aunts are all like, I met Warren Buffett. And my cousins in Texas were like, why would you guys leave? We just got a Walmart. And my aunts are like, there's no opportunity here. And, you know, we're not treated that great. And they're like, what are you talking about? So I learned as an early age that there was some real strong cultural differences between California and other places. I saw it personally. I was introduced to it. I also saw self-hating Latinism. I remember going to Texas, and it was okay for Mexican people to see other Mexican people driving a car. And if they didn't drive perfectly or they almost hit someone, you want to yell out, stupid Mexican, even though you're Latin, right? This was encouraged. This was Texas culture. This was encouraged Latin people. So I'm 13. I'll admit this. I was 13. I was a dumb boy. Okay. So anybody watching this, I was a young, impressionable teen boy, and it was stupid. So I started doing it. Well, my cousins are doing it. My mom, I still remember this. I was like, yeah, stupid Mexican, stupid Mexican. Ha, look, I'm doing it, cousins. Look, I'm doing it, primos, primas. And I feel this heat close to the temperature of the sun. And it's just here on my shoulder. And I realize it's a hand. It's a small hand. But the pressure and the heat is so much, I just feel like, And I turn back. And you know how Latin people have those eyes? They don't get angry. They just do the death eyes. Like if you're messing up. I've tried to explain it to my Caucasian friends, and like, my mom had these eyes that made you think like she was going to murder you. And my brother knows exactly what that straightened out a teenage boy real fast. So me and him were trained to, you see that, whoa. And she looked at me, she goes, we don't do that. And I'm like, Mom, all my cousins are doing it. And she's like, we're from California. So that was early on. Then as a boy, I kept hearing about how, so my mom would get very dark in summer. She's your complexion, but in summer, some Latin people can get really dark, right? Really dark. So, okay. Like I try to explain to some of my Caucasian friends, like in my family, there's someone who looks Asian. There's someone who looks African-American. There's someone who looks, Blanca, cousin Blanca, who's very fair skinned. I got an aunt who looks Japanese. I have another, we call him Pio Negro, because he looks very dark. So I'm trying to, the colorism is a wide range. So she'd get very dark during summer. And she was working for this international agricultural company, and she would travel around America. And so as a teen boy, she would travel and she'd come home and she'd tell me and my brother stories about how she was received. And it'd be places like she'd go to Idaho, and she's the top level exec, right? And she's coming, like you're the head of McDonald's West Coast, right? And you're going to go visit a local branch, but this is for farms. So she goes in to meet a farmer, and she goes to meet him at a local bar. There's another bartender there, and he turns to her and he goes, are you off the goddamn reservation? And that was not abnormal. A Caucasian person had to walk up and go, whoa, 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 don't attack this one. She's one of the good ones. One of the good ones. So I heard those stories as a teen boy. And I'm growing up in California, and I'm not seeing any of that here. And I had family in the Bay Area, and we did go to downtown LA, and I was in the conservative part of the valley, but I never saw that here. And so I started getting, and I was told like America's all the same. All of America loves diversity, and it's all like us here in the valley, and they're so great, and they love us, and there's nothing unique. Mexican people and Asian people and Black people and Arab people would be treated very well. Because as a young boy, one of my best friends was Sikh. I didn't know what Sikh was. Okay, he was a friend of mine, and he had the bun on his head, and everybody thought it was a girl because only girls wore buns. And then I'm like, he's not a girl, he's a boy. I don't know why they do that, but they do it. And I would get mad, and I go, stop picking on my friend. Right. So I had learned that there was a certain level of diversity. I was encouraged to participate in that. My mom forced me to go eat at Japanese restaurants early on. And I thought, I got mad because I'm like, they didn't even cook the fish. Why are you paying all this extra money for the sushi? And she goes, this is how these people do it, and we're going to respect that. I love sushi now. So that was a little bit of the background. Was I knew there was this disjuncture between what I was being told America was, what I was seeing as a child, and then stories from the front. I went to college, and I learned the horrible truth that America was not the land of love of diversity that I had seen. Particularly, I lived through the 1990s. So when Trump comes back, part of the animus for me that I find as a constant well of inspiration and youthful vigor is fear. It's terror. Don't look at my eyes. I'm not joking. I lived through the 1990s. It's what America's going through now. The 1980s were actually less racist than the 1990s in California. The 1980s were things were kind of coasting along, and then somewhere around the 1990s, we don't need all these illegals. We don't need all these Mexicans. It's got to be English first. What the hell are we doing with all these immigrants? Let's not have all these brown people in the universities. Can we get rid of affirmative action? All that was 92 to 97. Explosion. And you don't have to take my word. You can look at a history of California. Things were chugging along, late 70s. They weren't perfect, okay? And things got better every year, of course. I've heard some horror stories of the 80s, but generally things were chugging along, and society was like, we're diverse, we're diverse, we're diverse, we're diverse. 70s, 80s, and then somewhere around early 90s, it blows up. Doesn't calm down until the end of the 1990s. That's a historical fact.
Well, why do you think that is? Why do you think things started to change from your perspective around that time?
So the theory that I developed after speaking to 200 professors of political science from around America, Southern universities, Northern, East Coast, West Coast, et cetera, mostly political scientists, some psychologists. I call it the Fiji theory. So there's a more technical term for this. I'm not drawing it up, but basically it works like this. Fiji had a civil war. It's a little island country somewhere in the Pacific, and originally it was all native Fijians. And then England conquered it and started putting in people from India as workers. Then the English Empire collapses, and they're left to do their own thing. For a while, things work out. It's fine. Just, okay, we're independent, we kind of diverse here. And then somewhere around the 1980s, things start popping off. People start shooting each other, civil war. They're starting to assassinate leaders. They start talking about, well, maybe we need to expel you. Maybe we need to separate the island. Maybe we need to, where'd all this come from? Demographics. The native Fijians were 60% of the population for almost ever. And the Indian origin people were about 40%. Somewhere around the 1980s, the Indian origin people started having more babies. They had better health care, better access to food, et cetera. So the birth rate started going up. So it used to be 60%, 40%, and then it went 45, 55. And right around this group that went from 60 to 52, right when they hit, we're just about to not be over half. Boom. Explosions. And it doesn't settle until that demographic period's locked in, and the native Fijians are now the permanent minority, and the Indian origin people are now the permanent majority. And so only when the demographic shift completed did you have peace in the area, and the Civil War seemed to end. So there's a term for that if you talk to sociologists, where basically we were the dominant group, we were in charge, Grandpa was always like that. Great grandpa was always this way. Wait, no, we're losing it. No, I'm going to be a minority in my own country. What? Time to lash out and fight, attack, do whatever we got to do. And so if you look at California in the 1990s and you replace the demographics with white and non-white, the story holds the same. The Caucasian population was moving from roughly 62% to 52% over the 1990s. And it wasn't until they became a permanent and declared minority in California that this era actually came to an end. That was the point in which Latin people became the dominant minority. But even then, we weren't the majority group. It was just that non-Caucasian people were the majority. So that's all a hard fact. It's a theory if that's what caused it, but you can definitely look at the time period of the 1990s, and you can definitely look at the demographic shift, and it completely lines up. If that's true, then when we're looking at America, America is going through their shift too. And that's why Donald Trump occurred. That's why the revanchism, the return to racism, the acceleration of white supremacy out of nowhere seemingly came back, was because America is going through the demographic shift. And unfortunately, according to the US Census, Caucasian people are not going to be a definitive minority, or the demographic shift will not be over like the Fijian or California 1990s model until the year 2045, or when NASA says there'll be a fully functional colony on Mars. What that means is that you can expect racial turmoil, white supremacy, and Trump-like phrasing for the next 2 decades, and there's nothing you can do about it.
So it sounds like race relations are one of the primary reasons for you really supporting this movement and leading it at this point. And I know it's not the only one. I wanted to kind of give you an opportunity to definitely expand upon the race relations, because I know that's very intertwined with your beliefs, but also the general vibe of the nation right now. And also kind of tie that into the policy reasons for why you believe California would be better off as its own independent nation, right? Essentially, what I'm asking is, why would we be better off as an independent country? And if that's the case, what are the guarantees that we could remain independent and we would actually prosper?
Well, we're using correlative statistics to bring the whole story together. But to get to what you're talking about now, I prefer the term pro-diversity instead of racial politics, because Latin people are kind of an ethnic group. It's hard to call them a race. And then also, we're way better to Muslims than the rest of America, right? Way better. But anyways, economics and freedom. Why do we think we can do this, and why do we think it would work and California's economy wouldn't collapse? Well, there was a guy called Danny Savalos. He's the CNN legal correspondent and advisor for CNN News. And in 2016, when Calexit really got big, he said California could secede and America would be upset, but what could they really do about it? They're way too big. And so there's this concept that giant economies kind of have the ability to do whatever they want. If you look at the G8, G10, they basically set the entire score for the planet, right? We already had the United Nations since 1945, 1950. And then somewhere in the 1990s, a bunch of the top countries go, yeah, that's not good enough. Let's have a special club of just the richest countries in the planet, and we'll have our own conferences and set our own agenda. Around the same time, you started seeing Davos, Switzerland pop up and a lot more attention. Also, the International Monetary Fund started having more conferences. And so you began to see that after the Cold War fell and we went into a pure global trade regime, possibly for the first time since the late 1800s, when the English first developed steam engine transport. So you have English do steam engine transport. Then you have mercantilism, where the European countries take over different regions. And then you finally have world trade, where everybody's participating for the first time in world history since the 1990s. And roughly that's when you'll start seeing Davos, Switzerland pop up. Berkshire Hathaway is more important. The G7, then it's the G8, then it's the G10. Then maybe it's the G9, because we don't like that one country. And these are the groups that are setting the agenda for the whole planet. And California is one of the top 10 economies, and it has been since the late 1970s. California is the only place in the planet that's what's called a sub-governmental unit that's a G10 country. So that's what we always point out to people. There's no place on earth where little section of a country's a member of the G10. Everyone else is a country. Every single member of the G20 is a full-on independent country, full-blown. We're the only sub-governmental unit where we have to go, okay, I'll be in the G10, but I also have to ask this other big brother for permission to do whatever I want. France, England, China, Japan, India, Germany, they don't do that at all. At all. They're part of the EU, but they built the EU to do what they want. So it's a bizarre circumstance. It's gone on for 50 years. So that's just strange. I also think that the world economy recognizes that. In 2016, when we got very big, the International Monetary Conference held a meeting on what if California was an independent country. So when the top financial people on the planet in their super elitist conference that only 3,000 people on the surface of the earth get to go to have a meeting on their own with television cameras and a gigantic poster saying, what if California was independent? We think the idea is already there, that people already understand when you have a certain amount of economic magnitude, you basically do what you want. One of the best examples is Brexit. So I know Brexit hasn't been perfect, but everybody said England was going to fall into the ocean when it left the EU, and the Brexit and the currency would collapse and their economy would collapse and they would be all destitute. None of that happened. None of that happened. All the experts were saying that. All the experts are wrong. Why? Because it's too damn big. It's just too big an economy to do that with. The Europeans found out, turns out we have to trade with you because you're too large. We can't just cut you off because we're mad. Same thing with Russia. America's learning out you can't just cut off 1/3 of the world's gas production and think everything's going to work out just fine. The European economy is in collapse because of the cutoff of cheap oil and gas from Russia. They're going into a recession. That's why you're seeing all their leaders leave. You can't just do this. So we're one of these top 10 economies. It's not possible. Also, there's something called foreign direct investment, so FDI. And if you go on the California government, California's FDI #1, which means it's the most attractive place to invest in the entire planet of any economy anywhere in the world. California is #1, not America, just California. So when you look at that, we have outsized global influence. And when California was talking about Calexit in 2016 and now in 2024, it was global news. I mean, why is the prime minister of Denmark and a government official from the Canadian Parliament talking about how California should secede and join them? Foreign heads of state, foreign governments. That happened 2 months ago. So we're already known. When you have that level of economic power, you're basically going to be just fine. And that's what the CNN director, Danny Savala, said. So California leaves. America says, oh, we're upset. We don't want to trade with you. Okay, automatic recession for America. California leaves. Oh, we're mad. We don't want to trade with you. Okay, 90% of your fruits and vegetables, everything but corn, chicken, and beef, will be removed from all grocery stores of all Americans. You're suddenly third world Soviet level. Remember when they went in the Soviet Union and they showed them a grocery store and all the shelves were bare? That's what happens to America the moment they get pissed off at California and say, I don't want to play fair.
You know, I wanted to go into that really quick because I'm in Lindsay. That's where we based our company out of. It's right between Fresno and Bakersfield. So we used to be very well known for our olives. There's some red cans that say Lindsay olives. We still produce them, but we're really kind of expanding our citrus industry, right? So it is very interesting to me whenever it's Central Valley, meaning the counties of Fresno, Kings, Tulare, Kern, Madera, everything, right? Here in the San Joaquin Valley, Sacramento Valley up there, we produce, like you mentioned, majority of the nation's food. Many people don't know that. Many people don't know that places like Fresno are the largest city without an interstate running through it, that it's the third largest Hispanic city in the nation, growing fast, as well as Bakersfield. People don't know that the Central Valley is not only forgotten by the state government, but also by the federal government and many Americans, right? They don't know that when they're eating something, it's not grown in their state, it's grown here because of our mild climate, because of our agricultural technology, industrial output, all these things, right? The reason I'm bringing that up is because I wanted to ask you, what would be the implications of an independent California for places like the Central Valley, for large cities like Fresno, Bakersfield, Stockton, Modesto? What would that mean for the Inland Empire? Places that are growing, no one can dispute that, right? But are looked down upon and constantly spoken down to and referred to as a middle of nowhere, nothing, when we're more populous. The Central Valley alone is more populous than many states. And we have some of the most diverse cities in the nation, like Fresno and Stockton. I think they're somewhere around, like, I don't know, number 5 and number 9 or something.
So there's no question to be beneficial. Absolutely be beneficial. I am from the Valley and born and raised. I do know exactly what you're talking about. I worked in California government for the last 25 years. Part of that time was in Sacramento. And I was in Sacramento for 4 to 5 years. And when I told them I'm going to leave and go back to Fresno, it was endless ridicule. Right? Why are you going there? It's dead zone. That's why I told you I published my book here, because I knew how people ridiculed this place. And I wanted to let them know that intellectuals can come from here. That's why the entire Calexit movement started here. That's why I fought to make sure that reporters would recognize that the movement actually started in backwater, poor, dumb, agricultural Central Valley. No, we're intellectuals too. Look, 2 of us right here. Latin people here too. Liberals here too. Progressive people here too. That's why I did all that. You're right about the unique position. Basically, what happens is it's called the Mediterranean climate. There's only about 4 areas on the planet that support that. So America can never, ever grow the fruits and vegetables that we want. Neither can China. So while these economies get larger and the populations double and triple in size, the amount of arable agricultural land in the Mediterranean climate doesn't, which means our fruits and vegetables are only going to grow from 100 to 400% more costly in the future, as there's 3 times the global population, and that means 3 times the demand. So that's the thing to think about, is that 2/3 of the world population is going to be in Asia. There is no Mediterranean climate part of Asia at all, period, which means they have to import everything. A majority of the rice that China eats comes from here, period. We produce more rice for China and their giant population than they do in their entire country. And it's really just out of the Stockton Delta area. So we could do 2, 3 times as much. That's how much we actually produce. So if we're independent, there's a future global market of people who are going to be richer. There's a video called World Bank Expert President Tries to Explain to Stanford Students the Global Economy. And it's really sad, because these are Stanford economics students and they just don't get it. And what he's saying is, for the last 100 years, 80% of the wealth was in the West. In the next 30 years, 60% of the wealth is going to be in the East. So we're going from 80% of the wealth is America and Europe, mostly Europe, America, to about 30% of the global wealth for the first time since 1500s. And that will shake everything and reduce the entire Western order, as it's known power, over the last 150 years, to close to a satellite economy. And there's absolutely nothing anybody can do about it, short of starting a global nuclear war, everybody. And this is the former president of the World Bank saying this. So when we look at that, the economy is in Asia. Okay, well, there was a guy called Yao Ming, a Chinese basketball player. He was here, was a basketball player, went back to China, and then he just bought California wine, a bunch of different bottles, and just put California wine on it. It was so popular in China, he became a billionaire off that, not being an NBA player. It didn't say Napa Valley. It didn't say red. It said California wine, and it was just so enormously outdone here. Grapes are $100 in China or South Korea. So if you want to be a baller and you want to show off to the ladies at a club, what you do is you buy expensive liquor and produce from California. I was in a fraternity that was 80% Asian. They were telling me that, see these grapes that you can go to the grocery store? That's $100 to $300. That's how you show you're balling when you're at a club and you're a young man. You want to impress young ladies in South Korea or Japan and now China, because they don't have it there. It's massively expensive. A lot of the farms here in the Valley, I'm sure you know, are owned by Japan or China, not actually Valley people. That's so they can secure the shipment of goods to them. So you're the only candy store on the planet, and there's going to be 200 to 300% more children in the next 2 decades. Nobody can make a candy store like yours. Period. Can't be done. The Earth literally has to develop a Mediterranean climate over millions of years of geology. Not going to be done. So, by the way, if you just type in Mediterranean climate and wine, you'll see why. We're also the largest one outside of Greece. There's basically Greece and us and then a few specks around the planet. So nobody can produce the amount we have. Nobody can match that. So that's why 90% of the fruits and vegetables come from us. Can't be replaced anywhere. You're just going to get nothing. So when you look at that, being in a position for international trade is the key to gigantic wealth, especially for produce. A lot of our produce is shipped across to America, and a lot of our produce is shipped outside to foreign countries. So export sales to foreign countries is gigantic to ag. I'm sure you know about the World Ag Expo in Tulare. It's not called the America Wide Expo. It's called the World Ag Expo because people from Denmark, Japan, Sweden, Angola show up there to buy products and make stuff. It's the world's largest ag expo anywhere on the planet by far. Like you were saying, most people don't know it, but it is. Well, that shows the economic power of our produce. So let me introduce a new concept to you. Governor Schwarzenegger was a Republican. And for all of his faults, what he found out was that California is a donor state, and that's wrong, and that we're also under the control of the federal government, and that ruins our economy. So he criticized George W. Bush, a Republican, and Barack Obama, a Democrat, for the exact same thing, holding up California agriculture trade deals to Asian countries ready to buy it for about 5 years. So when I ask business people, hey, you're running a candy store, and before you sell that butterscotch roll, I get to walk in and say, you know what? I'm not sure I'm okay with you selling candy at your candy store. Let me get back to you in 1 to 5 years if I think it's okay for you to sell candy in your candy store. You're cool with not selling product for about half a decade, right? That's what happens all the time. Every day. It's been that way since the 1970s, constantly losing millions of dollars, billions of dollars. That's just ag. If you look at tech, it's a whole other thing. We lose billions, about $6 billion annually in lost tech sales because America's reputation is so horrible. Asian people won't buy our tech products. We're the top level tech producer for smartphones, laptops, apps, and programs. And the largest commercial base in the planet is scared of buying our stuff because we're tied to the CIA and the NSA. Bad for business. Additionally, there's a professor called Abraham Lowenthal. He teaches at the Schwarzenegger Center at the University of Southern California. He's formerly from the University of California at Long Beach. He's one of the top international trade experts on the planet out of Long Beach, with the largest port in the world, or third largest port is LA Ports Complex. He wrote a book called Global California. That's what inspired me to write Calexit. Global California, Rising to the Cosmopolitan Challenge. Wrote around 2010. And what he said was, being part of America is a financial loser for California, period, end statement. Now, if you want to be part of America because your heart and patriotism and freedom and democracy, great. Right on, go do it. But if you're thinking it's for our economy, no, we lose. We don't need America. We have global reputation. We can sell all our products to international people. They already know who we are independently from America. We could sell all our products, and the federal government is constantly getting in the way, and America's horrible reputation is constantly getting in the way. So when you consider that, I think it's like 15% of the average state and 15% of the American economy is internationally trade linked, whereas in California, it's 45% of our economy. This is what I was saying. When America goes through trade war with China, people were saying, is this good or bad? And I go, well, it might be great for America. But Trump's trade war with China will be nothing but ruinous for the California economy. Can't be anything else. So even if he resets trade for the rest of America, because we're 45% dependent on international trade, we're going to go like this. That's how you cause a deep depression, economic recession that you can't get out of. Markets don't really like instability, and neither do businesses. And that's exactly what happened to us. We talked to the president of the Bay Area Council, the top 400 companies in the Bay Area in 2016, personally. He didn't want to be on camera because he didn't want to be associated with Calexit. But he was talking about, oh my God, we cannot survive Trump's tariffs. We're internationally linked. And the guy just basically grabs and shakes the hell out of it. That's ruinous for our economy. Even if things settle up for America at the end, we're going to be ruined. And when you add on top of that the fact that it's the same under Democrats, we're a donor state. We pay more in federal taxes than we ever get out. We've done that since the 1970s. And yet we have the worst ghettos in America. The West Side here in Fresno is notorious. Highest African American infant mortality in America. Right here, Fresno, West Side. I've also lived in South Central Los Angeles. I've also lived in downtown Oakland. I've also lived in the Pocket, and I've also lived near West Sac, all mega ghettos. I visited the Tenderloin. We don't get to help those people, not because we don't have the money, but because it's got to go to American states. It blew my mind when I saw that we send money to Louisiana so that they can put more money on their children for schooling than we can do for our own kids. I just would like somebody from the government to go and tell the children of West Sac and the Tenderloin and downtown Oakland and West Side Fresno and South Central and Barrio Logan, San Diego, we could help you out, but we choose not to, because there's American children who are already doing better and they deserve more than you have. Go ahead and suffer. Now, we've done that for about 50 years. So when you add all that up, we don't need America. They don't do anything for us. Like Global California, Abraham Lowenthal pointed out, California introduced America to world trade in the 1930s. All of the first trade deals, the World Trade Organization, NAFTA, all that international trade stuff that America did was because Californians prompted them to do that and came up with the idea first and pushed America to do it. So people are like, how would you negotiate if you weren't part of America? All of America's negotiations were because of Californians. Going back to the 1930s and Randolph Hearst, that's in the book. So we started the trade, we made the negotiations, we sell most of the products, and the best you can do is take exorbitant amount of tax money and get in front of my business when I want to sell to customers. That's ruinous. Valley people are not making as much money as they could today because of the federal government. If that was gone, we'd be selling more products. We're also not in line to take advantage of the global economic shift that's coming for the first time in 500 years. The majority of the global economy is going to be in Asia, period. They know us more than they know America, period. On top of our ad products can't produce anywhere in Asia, period. You cannot grow more Mediterranean produce, period. They've got to come here. California got out of the recession in 2014 because of Chinese nationals investing in our housing market. When Xi Jinping wanted to meet with the American President Barack Obama for the first time ever, he said, we're meeting in California. It was the Chinese government that demanded the first meeting with the American president was in California because they only felt comfortable here. Silicon Valley in California has a direct link with India. Everybody in India knows what Silicon Valley is, and they know it's in California, not America. And they have the connection. Our influence is outsized and global. I think it's ridiculous whenever you watch a movie and it's made in America and they go, oh, that's what America is. It's a depiction of life in California, right? This doesn't go on in Nebraska or Iowa or Minnesota or Mississippi or Alabama or even northern Florida or South Carolina or Maine or Wyoming. It doesn't happen there. Maybe New York City, maybe Chicago, maybe Miami, and then that's about it. California is the only state-sized place with that level of diversity. In America, they only have urban areas. And everybody goes, well, New York's not diverse. The state's not diverse. The city's not diverse. The downtown Manhattan tip is the only California level diverse part. It's a tiny, tiny area about the size of Metro San Francisco. Most people forget that when they watch the movies. And so we don't have diversity in America that matches ours. And we don't have an economic profile that's similar. So America can do these horrible things. Just like when we were having a dot-com explosion in 2001, and then we had the dot-com bubble, which caused a horrible recession in California in 2001. That caused the great blackouts, which led to the recall election of Governor Davis. So we went into such a horrible recession, we couldn't even keep the lights on in California, 2001, basically. Dot-com bubble burst, power grid, Enron scandal, Gray Davis, you can look it up. That was all caused by the Federal Reserve out of New York City. Federal Reserve said, We want interest rates higher because it's good for the New York, Washington, D.C. metro economy. And we're going, well, we're having an explosion and we're running into inflation. So we need interest rates increased. Nah, we're going to do the opposite of what's good for your economy and do what's good for the New York economy. And we simply don't care that it will cause an automatic crippling recession in California. That's a fact. That was covered by the California government. Could do nothing about it. So then the Californians went to Bill Clinton, a Democrat, and said, hey, we're a donor state. We've been a donor state since the 1970s. Lost about $500 billion so far. Could you maybe give us 10, 20 billion out of the 500? Just because you came up with an economic policy that was ruinous for us, but good for America, maybe you could help us out a little bit. You get nothing. Bill Clinton said to California, you get nothing. Don't be surprised. There was a recession in 2008 with Barack Obama. Governor Schwarzenegger went begging on his knees to President Obama and asked, donor state, 700 billion in losses for decades. Can we just get 10 billion? You get nothing. So when it comes to recessions, that's two Democratic presidents said tough, suffer, or will cause the recession for you. And then Republican presidents who like to pick fights with foreign countries or get into trade wars, which are ruinous for us. So there's no economic benefit for us here. If we're independent, our economy would explode by 200 to 300% because we'd have more customers. Additionally, as we tell every business, in California, because we love regulation, there's a California regulation for every federal regulation. So there's OSHA, and then there's Cal OSHA, right? OSHA makes sure for safety and health for businesses. Cal OSHA does the same thing. It's just a little bit more extreme with the regulations. With independence, all federal regulations completely disappear. We don't actually need them. The California regulations are more detailed than the federal ones. So you still have safety regulations in place. You just removed the other half of the paperwork. When we ask business people, how about a 50% reduction in bureaucracy? All of them are like, my God, that would be huge. And then when we add, what about no more state income taxes because we're no longer a donor state and don't have to raise them on you? My God, you know what would happen if 50% of the regulatory burden was removed and the state income taxes were gone permanently? You would have an economic boom of businesses returning to California and new businesses coming here. You add on top of that, that you can expand international sales by 200 to 300%. We're talking basically like a Renaissance period economically again for California. That's not available under any other option but full independence, as I explained.
All that's very interesting. You brought up a lot. We'll get into Trump and
Sure.
presidential
Sure.
power and federal position on things right now.
Oh yeah, let's talk about Hexeth too. How it's okay to gun down protesters when we do. Okay.
Absolutely. We'll definitely cover that. And I wanted to echo what you were saying and what Governor Newsom recently mentioned was that California being a donor state, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe we've contributed, I think it was in 2023, about $18 billion in essentially subsidizing other states. And Texas, in comparison, actually took about 17 point something billion dollars from the federal government. Regardless of anyone's position on California independence, the reality is that it does seem that we are a donor state and that we are somewhat propping up other governments and the social services that they offer, right? So
about 35 states. We prop up about 35 states, and we've been a donor state since around 1977, or about 50 years.
And we just overtook Japan and being the fourth largest economy.
Yes, I heard that. Awesome. I heard that today. Yes. Yeah.
And you know, a lot of this kind of goes back to the idea that large sweeping policies made at the federal level definitely have an impact on us. And we are the largest manufacturing state. We do produce overwhelmingly the most produce and the most food. And when it comes to things like immigration policies, especially undocumented immigrants who make up a large percentage of everyone working in the agricultural fields here and all that, to me, that's concerning because, I mean, right outside of Lindsay, you know, everywhere around here, there still are orchards with fruit on them, and they should have been picked already. The blossoms have already come out and they've shriveled up and fallen off, and there's still fruit. And I don't see anyone lining up for those jobs. I don't see anyone taking back the jobs that apparently undocumented immigrants have been taking, right? At least here in California, in the Central Valley. Having said that, and having talked about the economic situation that California is in right now, it's a good segue to talk about President Trump and what his policies are doing here in California. I know you mentioned that we do a lot of business with China, a lot of business with countries that are receiving tariffs or on the receiving end of tariffs, rather. As we all know, and if my viewers don't know, tariffs are paid for by the country implementing them, not a country that, for example, if we put tariffs on China, our companies pay for that, not China. So what they're doing is putting reciprocal tariffs so that their companies would essentially pay that on their end. So what does that mean for California? I know President Trump is very polarizing. President Trump has done a lot of things that have really pushed the limits as to what executive power could and should look like here in the United States. So what are your concerns with this current administration, and what are your concerns with the Republican Party as a whole and the Democratic Party, and how all three of those, the president and the two parties that are in power right now, what are they doing for California, and what are they doing to California? And what would an independent California do and benefit from regarding separating itself from that system?
Well, I think Trump's already proven that he's not good for the California economy. So, and I'm here and I've talked to Republicans, and they're typically unaware of these things. So, like I said, his trade war with China is going to be ruinous for our economy, period, end of story. So if you work in produce, if you work in laptops, computer sales, etc., if you're a truck driver, if you're a crane operator, those blue-collar jobs, you're going to be hurt. Computer engineering, you're going to be hurt. So, period, horrible for our economy, going to be ruinous for our economy, even if it's good for America. No way out of it. So that's not good. So I see Californians going, well, he's an economic genius and business person, and he's going to tank our economy. Even if things work out for America, that's horrible for us. So even if he's doing the right thing, it's horrible for us. And I don't think he's doing the right thing. So number one, bad, horrible, ruinous for us. I don't care if you're a Republican or you're a blue-collar worker or you own $100 million, horrible, bad. Number two, salt tax. Trump tried to remove the salt tax on us. That is the state and local tax exemption that allows people to reduce their taxes on their homes. So they're able to take a deduction for their federal income taxes when they pay home taxes because of the amount of state and local taxes. Donald Trump removed that specifically to stick it to California homeowners. Just type in salt tax reduction, Trump. This goes back to 2016, 2017. He specifically did not like us and he wanted to hurt us. So he figured, what can I do? I can make those coastal liberals have to pay 3 times as much for their homes just to stick it to them. So that's not good. That's not good for anybody who owns money or owns more than $1 million. Ruinous for everybody, Republican, Democrat. Did it, loved doing it, never talked about undoing it, period. Number two, he's not good for global reputation. I mean, when he started that war with Rocket Man with North Korea, remember that? He said he called the North Korean dictator Rocket Man on Twitter, and he started kind of a war of words with him. The first thing North Korea did was come up with a commercial on how they developed a nuclear missile that can hit California. So he starts a thing, let all nuke California. So there's that. Also, Trump came to California and he said, oh, you don't have water. I open the water. I open the floodgates to release the water to you guys because I know you have water and these liberals don't get it and they're horrible. What you won't see Republicans mention was that he permanently damaged farmland. Some of those fields were not supposed to be flooded with water. There's a way that you grow the crops where it's fallow and then you put the water in. You don't just dump water and fertilizer. Like you said, we're the best ag growers here. He just dumped water, ruined those fields. So when you add up, he ruined the economy with China. He specifically attacked our homeowners. He's ruining ag products. It's like, even if the guy's trying to help, he's screwing things up for us. And when he's not intentionally trying to screw us up, he's trying to specifically stick it to us. And that goes from blue collar to the wealthiest. So I don't see how he's been good for our economy at all in any capacity. Additionally, the guy's been cutting funds to us. When you cut those social service programs, that means we have to draw more out of the limited tax base. So I'm waiting to see any economic policy or any suggestion he's had that's actually been good for us. Now, you want to argue different for America? Okay, but I'm focused on Cali. Additionally, when he comes and he says, I'm going to round everybody up, right? And when he went to, I think it was Oakland, and he said he was going to only get violent illegals, right? And then he had a guy who'd been here for 20 years, who was undocumented, was a father, no criminal record, no problem, member of the community, great dad, great husband, disappeared to an El Salvadoran prison, and then told, oh, I can't ever get him back out. So that's ruinous for communities. That causes Latin people to disappear. 2016, 2017, when he did this, there'd be sections of LA that'd just be hollowed out, where there's no stores operating, there's no work there, there's nothing, because they're gone, and any businesses dependent on those people don't get nothing because they're terrified. So, and then you just talked about fruit rotting on the vine. That's bad. That's not good for the economy. So I haven't heard of anything he's done that's actually productive for our particular economy. A lot of Republicans will talk about America overall. Maybe that's true. But I've just given you 6 examples how it's ruinous for California, and it's directly tied to him. Additionally, how smart is it to be part of a union where the president basically says, I don't like you, and I mean you. I'm pointing at you specifically. I don't like you guys out of 50 states. You got to go back to the 1880s to see where that they did that. I mean, when Trump was president last time, the Republican Party had an annual convention, their annual convention. And the whole concept was California is not America, and they're horrible and anti-American. You got to go back to the 1880s when I think one of the Whig Party was upset with New York State to find where one of the 2 national political parties had an entire convention aimed at how one of 50 states is horrible and un-American. That level of focused hate hasn't happened in a century. I'm also sure you saw the LA Times poll that came out 6 months ago that happened right before the Palisades fire and Trump's reaction to that. I'm sure you're aware of that. The LA Times poll showed 48% of Republicans across America view Californians as not American. Not an exaggeration, not my phrasing, LA Times. 48% of Republicans across America view Californians, all Californians, that means you, as not American. Then we have the Palisades fire. People are dead. They're burned alive. Their bodies are crisp, burning, steam coming off, vaporized faces lying on the ground. Homeless people now. People destitute. They just watch their loved ones get burned alive, and they don't have a home, and it's just reduced to grass. These people are beside themselves. And then Donald Trump comes on TV and says, I don't know if I want to help because I'm not sure I like you guys. And then Speaker Johnson says the same thing. And what scares me, I'm quite worried about this, is that when I tell people a lot of that, they don't know that that's 2 of the top 3 most powerful people in America. It goes president, vice president, speaker. So 2 of the top 3 most powerful people in America said, when there's people dead and bodies on the ground and people are destitute in a natural disaster, I'm not sure I want to help because I don't like you. And so I ask people, tell me what stable Western country that happens in. Right? Where like there's a tsunami in Leeds, England, okay, where the Beatles came from. And bodies are bloated and they're washing around on the shore and floating up. And then London comes on TV and says, look, I know we're all English people and we've been English and we speak English, but I don't know if I want to help. So maybe you can just have your bodies float around on the sea. Would you call that a stable country that did that? Can you name a stable country that happened in? Yeah, everyone has that look on their face. Nobody can say any example of that happening in any stable country or any time in America where that's happened. And you had 2 of the top 3 most powerful people in the country do it. And then I asked people, tell me about the Republican backlash. Tell me about the Republicans who voted for Trump and said, Mr. Trump, boy, you're great. I really think you're going to bring America back to greatness, but you cannot talk to fellow Americans this way. That is too far. These are U.S. citizens. So I ask people, tell me that Republican who said that. Everybody has the same look on their face like you. There's no Republican in all of America who did that. So then I ask the question again. Tell me what stable country where that happens, right? So it's London, I don't want to help you leads have your bloated bodies sit around, and nobody in the English Parliament is upset at all. Does anything like that ever happen in a stable country? No. Can you name an example in the last 60 years of any stable country in the Western Order where that happened? No. But it happened to us, and it's happening now. Why is that smart to be part of that? If we're doing things and we're undergoing things that people have these wide deer in the headlight look on, going, oh my God, he's right. And you can't name any stable countries, and you can only name Central African failed democracies where this happens in. And we've been doing this about 10 years, and it only seems to get worse. Well, what's a rational person supposed to think? One of the stories we have is you and I are standing on a yacht, okay? Water rises an inch, okay? Next year, the water rises another inch. Next year, rises another inch. Okay. Next year, rises another inch. But one of those years, the water rises to the deck level. That's where your foot's on the platform. And it's starting to lap up against the bottom of your foot. And I turn to you and I say, Esteban, can we please have a conversation, just a conversation about building a life raft? And you look at me and go, idiot. That's what we're getting. Why are you talking about Calexit? That's crazy. That's radical. You're seeing the same thing I am, and I'm asking to have a conversation about building a life raft, and I'm the crazy one? Water's lapping up against their foot. It wasn't that way for the last 4 or 5 years. Things have been out of whack for a while. Like I tell people, this is the best time for Calexit. In 2016, nobody in California wanted to believe that Donald Trump was America's choice. Hell no. He's not America's choice. A minority put him in. No. It's 3 elections in a row this man's been able to run. He committed an insurrection, and now he's more popular. Trumpism's going nowhere. Trumpism belief is going nowhere. His beliefs are sticking around. So everyone in California finally recognizes this is the America you're tied to. They like this guy. It's 3 elections in a row. And the one that he lost against Biden was by 3 percentage points. That's not a repudiation at all. Sorry. Biden didn't get 65 and Biden got like 52%. Sorry. Not a repudiation. That's a barely squeaking out a win. And everybody in Europe and the planet sees it. So 3 elections with this guy, an insurrection. He's more popular. And you've done 2 impeachment trials and 3 to 5 federal and state investigations. And he's beat every single one of them. No one in California believes the federal government can protect them. And no one in California believes that this isn't Trump's America. Nobody wanted to hear that in 2016. Hell no. Federal system works. He's going to be in an orange jumpsuit. We're going to get him. Everything's right. He's a fluke. America's going to pop right back into place. Nobody's saying that anymore. Hell no. He doesn't represent America. A foreign government did. No one's saying that anymore. So now people in California are finally where we wanted them to be in 2016. You are attached to these people permanently. It is dangerous and not good for your health and reckless, and nothing in the federal system can save you, and you've had 10 to 12 years to watch this play out. What do you need, another 10 to 20? At what point do they come to your house?
Something that really I did not appreciate and frankly was very concerning to me was, and I'm thinking now, looking back on it, and I didn't really see this much in the mainstream media. Fresno B, sure. Visalia times Delta, sure. But during the Palisades fire in LA, President Trump ordered the release of water from our reservoirs in Tulare County. Don't remember if it was elsewhere also, but Cahuilla Lake, Lake Cahuilla and Lake Success, he ordered the release of the water. And we were mentioning a Mediterranean climate, right? We have very hot, dry summers here. We don't get summer rain. And then our rainy season is the winter. What I don't appreciate, and what really concerned me, was that we could have someone on another coast with no understanding of our water system, of our climate, of the way that we interact with Mother Nature, right? And giving us the ability to produce the food that everyone eats. It really concerned me that we did have someone, in this case, it would be a coastal elite from the East Coast, right? Ordering the release of Central California water, somehow going down, up over the Grapevine, which is a mountain range, right? And then ending up in LA's water system to then get to the Palisades fire. And he called that a win. And what concerns me about that is we could have our natural resources. We could have, and this is the precedent, right? We could have our operations and everything that we do here, including technology, agriculture, whatever, right? That could be changed at a whim. And I think that is an expanded executive power that, sure, he has control over the Army Corps of Engineers and he can make those decisions, but is it right for us? And that's not to say that I'm endorsing Calexit or that I'm opposing necessarily. It's more so that these things matter. And if people really truly looked at the label of what they're eating and see that it was made in Delano, right, or grown in Delano for grapes, or if they were pistachios from Fresno County, right, they would understand how important it is to not waste our water and to not damage our farmland. And then to call that a win, to me, seemed like not so much a slap in the face, but such a lack of willingness to understand how things work out here. So this is a good segue, actually, because we were talking about the Republican Party's influence on the California economy, our state as a whole, the culture, and President Trump's really effect that he's having worldwide and also in our state, right? Let's talk about the Democrats, because I mentioned coastal elitism, right? And I gave that label to President Trump. I could say the same thing about many in the Democratic Party who are coastal elites. I mean, Bill Maher just did an interview with Governor Newsom, and to Governor Newsom's credit, he did defend the Central Valley, saying that we matter and that the Democratic Party's problem is their communication and talking down to people. Bill Maher essentially said, why would a high-speed rail make sense? Who wants to go from Merced to Bakersfield, right? Or
Bill Maher's ignorant on what the high-speed rail point is. I can thoroughly educate anybody on that.
Yeah. I would love to talk about high-speed rail also, and if we tackle the Democrat influence and potential obstacles in secession, if we talk about that, we can kind of migrate into the high-speed rail situation.
Yeah.
So that's a whole can of worms in itself.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I guess what I'm asking is coastal elites here in California who are Democrats, who have a lot of wealth, and their wealth is tied into the American economy and Wall Street. Do you think that they would be on board with a Calexit movement? And do you think that it could affect them? Or do you think that their estate essentially and their wealth could grow with an independent California?
Their wealth would grow. So like I was talking about how California started every international trade deal since the 1930s. NAFTA and the revision of NAFTA were prompted by Californians. So there's nobody in California or in the Calexit movement saying, let's not trade, or let's cut off stock market access, or let's cut off the flow of money. Like I was saying, we're FDI number one. So we have to be internationally linked, and independent California would have to be internationally linked to America. I was just pointing out that if Americans wanted to be silly, we could collapse their economy just as well as they could collapse ours. It would be stupid and ruinous for California to not be trading with America and allowing the free movement of capital and people back and forth. We're talking about a Canada-style relationship, not North Korea. So that would have absolutely no effect on their money in the stock market. Just like, you can move anywhere and buy stocks in Germany, et cetera. By law, those are yours anywhere you want to go. No effect at all. So when you look at it that way, they would be gaining money because they wouldn't be state income tax, right? We're no longer a donor state, so we cut state income tax. That's huge for everybody with cash, period, end of story. Secondly, the SALT tax could never be threatened again. A lot of people with money, every single person with over $1 million in capital in California was directly threatened by the SALT tax. You want to talk about the Democrats? The Democrats backed up the SALT tax too. Trump took it away to hurt California, and then Joe Biden did absolutely nothing to undo it, and Kamala Harris couldn't be bothered to speak on our behalf. So what good were the Democrats? This blows my mind. I hate you, California. I'm going to invent a financial policy to stick it to you. Oh, the Democrats are in charge. Great. Yeah, we're not going to do anything about that. What's the difference? And then you add Obama holding up trade deals. What's the difference? Right? Hey, can I get a debt help for get out of my recession? No, I'll treat the same way as a Republican. So it's not really a better deal at all. Everybody's like, oh, Nancy Pelosi represent California. Nancy Pelosi spent 90% of her time in Baltimore. Okay, not here. And I don't think you represent California very well when you walk up to Asian people and tell them go back to Asia because they were saying something rude. And I also don't think that if you're Nancy Pelosi, it's a good idea to push a small Latina child out of the picture because you're angry that you lost a vote. Those aren't California values. Secondly, so I think the rich would be fine. They wouldn't be hurt and they would make more money because you'd have less taxes. Additionally, a lot of the rich invest in multiple companies. If the entire economy of California was growing by 100 to 300% because there's no fettered international trade, so you have trade economies, right? And then you have the guy who sells toilet paper to them, the guy who sells grapes, the guy who sells cigars to the drivers. If the trade economy grows, all those other products they buy grow too. Well, that's all the other local businesses in California. You can't have a 40% boom in one industry and not have it affect all of the other related industries: housing, science, education, tech, vacation products, car sales, etc. So all the businesses rise, and you don't have to pay state income taxes. That's a boom. And you have 50% regulatory less overhead. I have not spoken to one business person, and I know millionaires, who said that's not anything but a ridiculous dream come true. So that would be fine. I do want to point out that you don't have to support Calexit. We're not asking anybody to support Calexit. What we're asking people to do is look at the facts. Jay and I have said this a million times. We think that once you look at the facts, it's an automatic yes. We have not met one person who looked at the facts at Calexit and said, I'm aware of all the facts and I accept these are facts, and I'm still saying no. The worst that happens is somebody asks one question, then two, we have an answer, then they get frustrated, then we do 3, 4, 5, then they get frustrated, then they do 8 more questions. And then when they find that we have 15 different answers for every single one and they're perfect, they go, well, I'll get back to you. That's not you winning a debate. That's just you being a child and being flustered and you don't want to concede. So nobody has heard all the facts, accepted all the facts, and said, I still don't think so. What always happens is, I didn't know that. I didn't know that. I didn't know that. I didn't know that. Oh my God, that's true. Oh my God, really? Oh my God, they did. Oh my God, they did that? Yes. Oh my God, this has gone on 50 years. Oh my God, the Dems didn't really do anything about it. Oh my God, there's no plan to make this better. Oh my God, that's what happens every single time. That's why I told the San Francisco Chronicle, and they printed this. I'm ready to quit the movement the moment the facts are acknowledged. But to date, we still don't get that. There's so much misinformation. We have to do so much education. If everybody's educated of the facts and they go, Mark, we heard it all. We get it's true. We don't care, don't want it. I'm dead in the water. Can't do anything. Got to quit. We've never seen that. I've talked to maybe 5,000 people about Calexit. I have yet to meet one. And that's about 50 different reporters and about 10 different politicians. And I also interviewed 200 professors. I have yet to meet anybody on this planet who goes, I'm aware of all the facts and I still don't know. Every single one of them is blown away and unsure, and they didn't know the facts. And that includes professors and government officials. And when you're talking about, I don't have to back Calexit, fine, but you're starting to attack like a California nationalist. My boss was smiling because about half an hour ago, the way you were talking about the Valley was what we say. You don't have to back Calexit, but you were talking Calexit talking points. That's not to say anything. It's to say that Californians inevitably come to this. So why is Governor Newsom and why is Lieutenant Governor Eleni Koulounakis in the last 2 weeks, going on television and saying, hey, planet, don't consider us part of America when you're talking about Trump's trade deals. Consider us separate from America. We're separate from America. Don't think of us as part of America at all with Trump's trade deals. The governor said that, and the lieutenant governor said that, and they said it loudly, and they said it on TV, and they said it this month. That's California nationalism talking points. I'm sorry. That's straight up our talking points. I don't need you. Don't think of us as part of America. We're hurt by the stupid policies of America. We need to get away from it. The top 2 elected officials in all of California are straight up talking Calexit talking points in the last 2 weeks. Explain that to me, right? Like, no, you should be saying, I don't care that it's ruinous for our economy. I don't care that it's stupid. I don't care America picked somebody who hates us and intentionally said he wants to hurt us. We're all Americans. Let's stick together, guys. That's not what the governor and lieutenant governor are saying in the last few days. They're saying, planet, world, all countries on the planet do not think of us as part of America. I'm sorry, that's a Calexit talking point. Top 2 officials are saying it. Well, that's why we think eventually people come around to the facts and they see there's no other way out. You can't do anything when the Republicans own the House, Senate, presidency, and all 4 levels of power. The Republicans are more powerful than they've been in 100 years. A lot of people are saying midterms will fix things. Bull stuff. Not true. You got to go back to the 1920s, 100 years ago, to find when the Republicans had this much power. People are going, well, George W. Bush had the House and the Senate. True, but he didn't have the Supreme Court. You got to go back 100 years to find out when the Republicans had this much lock on power at the federal level. By the way, the last time they did was right before they caused the Great Depression. That's a fact. So now we're in a unique situation we haven't seen in a century. And we're supposed to hope we're going to ride it out. I mean, I'm sure you saw Pete Hegseth. Hey, Secretary of Defense, if you're given the order to gun down protesters, you'll deny that, right? I don't want to answer that question. What do you think? I mean, why aren't you jumping up and down on that? And then you're Latin, right? I'm Latin. He nominates Stephen Miller to oversee the immigration department. Stephen Miller is the only person declared by the Congressional Hispanic Caucus as an avowed white supremacist. That means all the elected officials in all of DC got together and looked at every human in America and said, that guy's a white supremacist. And then what does Donald Trump do? Make him in charge of immigration. And then I'm sure you saw where Donald Trump said all Mexicans are. That was a good time. My mom cried for 40 minutes. That was fun. And then we asked him, can you explain that or say anything or apologize? And he would say nothing and not apologize, but he took a picture of eating a taco salad and smiling right at the camera like, I don't give a crap about what you think. And then he picks a vice president. I'm sure you know how J.D. Vance won his election, right? In Ohio. J.D. Vance was not going to win his election in Ohio. Too moderate. Then he ran a television commercial. This is a fact. You can look it up. J.D. Vance only won because of the television commercial. You know what that television commercial said? Do you hate Mexicans? Not joking. Type it in, look it up. When he ran that TV commercial asking if Americans hate people that look like us, that's when he won the race. Right after he won that race was the first time Trump called him. Then Trump, when he's announced as president, says, I want to reenact the Eisenhower deportation ban. It was an awesome thing. Awesome, super great plan. Do you remember what that was called? Operation. That's the most racist term for Latin people in America. So as a Latin person, I'm watching a guy, as president, saying, I want to redo Operation. By the way, I'm the guy that said all Mexicans are. And then I just hired a vice president who ran a TV commercial who said, do you hate Mexicans? And I appointed somebody to immigration who's an avowed white supremacist and the only one declared by the largest collection of elected Latin people in America. And I'm supposed to look at that and go, everything's fine. Everything's fine. You see that meme of the dog with the coffee and everything's on fire? Yeah, this is fine. This is fine. And then when I talk to African-American people and I go, I'm sure you saw when he had his nomination conviction, when he had Jason Aldean and Aldean's wife as the only guests in his press box. So he's at his official nomination convention, biggest event before he runs the race. Press box. You get to sit with the press. Special. Everybody can look. Only 2 people get to sit with him. It's Jason Aldean and his wife. Jason Aldean, who wrote the country music song Don't Try That in a Small Town, which featured Caucasian people fighting with minorities, and then was filmed in the last courthouse to hang a black man dead. And when Aldean was asked about it, he says, bro, I just couldn't look it up online. It's just an accident. Yeah, the courthouse is featured in 3/4 of the music video. Yeah, it's featured prominently. Yeah, we had to do special lighting, but it's just a mistake that it happened to be the last courthouse to legally hang a black man dead. And I feature it in my country music video with white people beating up on minorities. And the title said, don't try this in a small town. And then Trump said, this is my guy. He's a good guy. And then Jason Aldean, the year before, I'm sure you saw where he dressed up in blackface to impersonate Lil Wayne. But he said that was an accident. So have you heard of something called crystal knocked?
That's essentially when, and please add to this as I explain.
You have a history. You're a history buff, I know.
That's essentially when, organized by the Nazi Party, right? They kind of went into all the shop owners who were Jewish or those targeted populations and ransacked everything. And it wasn't just that; it was a lot of violence as well. But that's kind of like a very basic foundational explanation of what it was. But please continue.
That's it. Night of Broken Glass. So there's two types of Jews. This is a story. You can see a lot of rabbis told it. I heard this from a rabbi out of New York. There's two types of Jews. Kristallnacht happened, and half the Jewish community said, oh my God, everybody in Germany just attacked Jews and Jewish stores and smashed our windows out. Time to get out. This is only going to get worse. And then there was another group who said, calm down, relax. They're just blowing off some steam. Just broke a couple windows. Did anybody get killed? No. Did they put anybody in prison? No. They just broke some window shops. They're just blowing off some steam. Hitler's not going to do the final solution. He's just talking. It's just talk. Calm down. You guys are being snowflakes. You're reading into this. Just relax. Every Jew who said that is dead. Every Jew who said, holy, sorry, get out, had kids and grandkids. So, hey, I think Jason Aldean's a great guy. And I think Operation was awesome and Mexicans are, and I want a white supremacist to run immigration for me and my vice president to say I hate Mexicans. Wake up. We're there.
So, wow. That's a lot. It's a lot to process, definitely.
It's a lot to process because it's happening right now and you're living in it. This is going to have real world implications for everybody, you and me.
Yeah. And there's no question that in today's world, things are so polarized and you do hear things from both sides, right? And what I mean by that is you have one side not really pointing out anyone specifically that says something or does one thing, and the other side feels like they have to match that energy. And whether that's good or bad, it's up to, I guess, everyone to figure out for themselves. But I wanted to get into the mechanisms and actually how this would happen, right? How would a secession happen? And I'm aware of the process, essentially getting this on the ballot of 2028 and the constitutionalities after supposed yes vote from most Californians if that happens, right? So can you just walk us through the process from getting signatures right now to getting it on the state ballot, and then after that?
So there's two things you need to know. One is Brexit, and then one is a court case called Texas versus White. And the reason there's a lot of misinformation about this is that the media basically will never print this. So I've talked to 35 reporters. We've only gotten one to print this. None of them will print it, even though it's all fact, all verifiable, and we gave them all the details. I don't know why they do that, but this is what happens. So most reporters won't admit that there's a court case called Texas versus White. Simply won't do it. If you see articles that talk about Calexit, that go, Calexit's impossible or illegal, secession can't happen, it's not in the Constitution, period. They won't mention Texas versus White. That's the first red flag you should pay attention to. The other one is that if they do mention Texas versus White, they will not mention the phrase consent of the states. That is the operational phrase. So after the Civil War, there was a Supreme Court case, the only one in all of American history to talk about secession, period, end of story. There is no other case. There's just one. That means that one case is the entirety of legal precedent in America, period. The American legal system is based on something called stare decisis, which means case law. Basically, it's different from common law. So our entire legal system is, if you and I go to court, I have to show a previous case in order to argue this is how the judge should rule with my client. I can't go, it just seems more moral that you should look at the law this way. Lawyers go to school to study case laws. They just learn tons and tons and hundreds of cases going back to the 1800s on why this is this. So every law, well, this case and this case, and Johnson versus X said this. That's how you have to do it. So there's only one court case on secession. You must reference it when looking at the law, period, end of story. That's the way the entire legal system is. Additionally, the U.S. Constitution says for all legal questions, there's only one person who gets to decide, the Supreme Court, period, end of story. That's in the Constitution. Okay, so now we're down to the Supreme Court looked at secession once in Texas versus White, and they said you can secede with quote, consent to the states. They said you can't unilaterally secede, meaning get your guns and shoot your way out. But if you got consent, you could leave. The newspapers will not print that Texas versus White exists, and they will not print that consent to the states is there. Additionally, they will not print that Erwin Chemerinsky, that's Erwin Chemerinsky, he's out of UC Berkeley. He started 2 University of California law schools. He's the most cited legal expert in all of America, according to Wikipedia, and he's the top constitutional scholar here in Califia. He was asked about Calexit. He said a simple majority vote of Congress could qualify for consent. Newspapers will never mention his name and never mention his legal interpretation. I don't know why. But when you add those 3 things up, it means that a simple majority vote of Congress is legal under the Constitution for us to leave. And it's been that way for over 100 years, and just nobody brings it up. Those are the facts. Why that's that way, I don't know. People asked Anton Scalia, who was a Supreme Court justice, about secession. He goes, the Supreme Court settled that. Well, first, you're a lawyer and a judge. You're supposed to reference cases, not historical events. You're not a history major. You're a legal professional. He didn't mention a case. Secondly, Texas versus White exists. He couldn't mention it. So you have Supreme Court justices providing misinformation out there and top scholars saying it. There's a guy named David A. Carrillo out of the UC Berkeley Constitution Center. He's constantly providing misinformation. So they won't mention Chemerinsky, they won't mention Texas versus White, and they won't mention consent. All of them exist. All of them are online. All of them take less than 5 minutes to find. That's the law, period, end of story, no interpretation. The only interpretation could be the Supreme Court saying consent means amendment. So sometimes you'll see some articles saying California secession would require an amendment. There's no basis in the law for that at all, even though they have lawyers saying that. It says consent of the states. It does not say through an amendment process of the states. So if the Supreme Court meant amendment, why did they not say amendment? If you're saying secession is only possible through consent of the states, why did you not say secession is only possible through an amendment? The amendment process was around for 100 full years more before that court case came out. It's not like they didn't know. There's also something called the plain language spoken rule in law, which says you're supposed to say what you mean. So if you meant amendment, you should have said it. You didn't. So maybe you didn't mean it at all. Only one group who can say the truth. That's called the Supreme Court of America. They're the most conservative they've been in 90 years, according to NPR, and they're all beholden to Trump, who hates California. So how do you think that interpretation is going to go? Simple majority vote of Republicans. Sure, get the hell out. So that's the half. The other half is Brexit. So Brexit set the new international legal standard for secession. You basically have to have what's called an educated plebiscite. So you have to have some sort of education of your population, and then you have to have a fair and democratic vote observed by international observers, right? So we actually had a smart conversation. We're not just putting this vote up in front of our people. They actually had some time to think and be educated about it. And we had a bunch of foreigners come and watch our election and say, yep, that's democratic. They did it totally democratic. All you need is 52% at that point to qualify. That's now the international legal standard. So California, our initiative set at 55, but the actual standard internationally is 52%. So even if we don't make the vote, if we get 52%, we still made the vote by international standards. Anyways, once you have Californians as a majority saying, we read a report produced by the government on Calexit. It's called the Blue Ribbon Panel Study. California government does this all the time. And then they read the report and they held the election, 52%. We're shooting for 55. You have legally met the international standard, period, by international precedent recognized by all Western courts on the planet. Then you move into the constitutional process, which is Texas versus White. And we think that the Republicans hate us, since 48% of them said they don't view us as Americans, and since their choice for president and choice for speaker said it's okay to deny us funds when bodies are on the ground, and absolutely nobody was bothered or protested that decision at all. And they held a convention years before on how we're un-American and horrible people. So we think, they'll let us go. So all we got to do is have a vote domestically here, and then we'll get permission to leave, and it's 100% legal. For whatever reason, Newspapers will not print Texas versus White, consent to the states, or Erwin Chemerinsky's hypothesis. I'll leave that to you or your viewers to ask why when I've explained it to 35 reporters and provide them hard citations for everything.
Thank you for explaining the process, and I wanted to go into a hypothetical. So let's say most of Californians agree, you know what, we should be independent. Let's say enough signatures are gathered and this ballot initiative is on the ballot in 2028, right? So if that's the case, and we go through a hypothetical legal process where we do in fact leave the United States of America and become independent, what would that look like then? Because in my mind, there would be huge operational obstacles, meaning we would have to figure out what national defense would look like for a newly independent California. We would have to look at how we would protect our borders, which there would be essentially 2 new borders that are international. What would maritime law look like? What would, and you don't have to go into
no, ask them all. I already got an answer for everything.
Yeah, and what would that mean for the traditional enemies of the United States of America, like Canada? I'm sorry. Well, now Canada, right? China, Russia, regional growing countries like Mexico that could eventually possibly be competition for the United States, especially with an independent California. What would all that look like, and how could we guarantee that even if Californians say that we want to be independent and we do become independent, the United States wouldn't just come and take us back, or that there wouldn't be agreements made between the United States and traditional allies so that they could economically embargo us, for example, and pressure us to rejoin? What would that look like? Because those are objections that I hear a lot regarding Calexit and being independent ourselves. So that'd be great if you can go into that, please.
Absolutely. And this is why I asked you to do tough questions. We have answers for all these. We just can't get the news to print them. So if you ask for permission to leave and the Republicans kick you in the ass on the way out, they're not going to fight for you to come back. If I hated your guts and I think you suck and I don't like you and you're messing up my Congress and messing up my culture and messing up my kids' education, I'm going to claw to have you back after I voted for you to leave with celebration. That doesn't make any sense. So that's the first part. They hate us. We're doing this completely legal. If you hate someone and you kick them out of your house, you're not begging for them to come back. And Republicans, for all their talk about being pro-business, are vicious on cultural issues. Vicious. I've heard many Republicans say, damn the economy. I don't want those transgendered this or undocumented that, you name it. So I'm here in the Valley. We see it all the time. So I don't think that would happen because we're asking for permission. And we're also doing it completely legally. Secondly, for America to make a binding decision in Congress and then completely violate it would basically rip the country apart. So what you'd be talking about is if, let's say Roe v. Wade was still the law of the land, and then Trump just unilaterally declared it not the law, like the court didn't do it, you'd have riots in the streets. So that's roughly what you're talking about, is that people would vote for this, and then somehow, even though a majority of Americans voted for this, they went back against it. You'd have people who wanted that vote, and then you'd have civil war in the streets. So we don't think that's an option. When we're talking about the military, the fact is that if you took the amount of money that California donates to the American military and just kept it in California, we have the 3rd largest military by funding overnight, larger than Russia. So who's going to attack us when we have more money? Secondly, if you're looking at the Ukraine war, most wars are run by missiles, satellite systems, intelligence operations, jets, drones, missile strikes. All that's high-tech stuff. Guess who the #1 producer and the state with the most engineers who makes that in all of America is? It's right here. So we have the most technical acumen and the most production for the type of things that win wars these days. Obama went to California when he wanted to create Cyber Command to defend the American military. He went to California. Got our experts first. Additionally, there was something called the base realignment and closure procedure. So the Cold War ended in the 1990s, and President Clinton came in and he had a massive amount of closure of American bases. It was called the BRAC, base realignment and closure. Massive reduction of American military, the kind you hadn't seen since the 1930s. Absolutely no effect on California. We had the most bases under Reagan. We lost the most bases. Totally fine. Economy recovered. Everything's fine. And additionally, what they found out was that when the BRAC said, hey, we're going to leave and you're going to lose your job, you better move to Kansas and be a military engineer for us. This is in the BRAC report. They couldn't get most Californians to go because they could say, I'll just find another engineering job. So America, if you like being the most powerful military in the world, you need these things called satellite systems and missile systems and technology and jammers and jets and all that stuff. That all comes from us and our people here in California. So if you're not nice to us, you lose all the things that allows you to win wars and intimidate rivals. And then you'll be able to be knocked off very easy by Russia and China. So choose wisely, because we're the people that allow you to kick ass and take names. That's just the way it works. If you went back to Vietnam era, it'd be Texas and the South, because you were still working with militaries mostly dependent on manpower. Things have changed wildly since the 1990s. Look at all the wars. So can't do it, and they need us. Secondly, we're talking about being friends and partners. If America, let's say America invaded California after letting us go, automatic recession for America. We're too internationally linked. We have too many trade connections, too much money going back and forth, too many businesses. You invade a country, you destroy the economy. Look at every country that's been invaded in the last 60 years. They were all detached from the global economy. Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria, Libya. They're trying to invade Russia. They're trying to detach it. Same thing with Iran. They're trying to detach it. That's why you do all the embargoes before the invasion. There is no economically linked country that's been invaded since World War II, period, in story. California's FDI #1, foreign direct investment #1. That means we have the most international linkages of any place on earth. Why would China invade California when it would disrupt our economy and cause Chinese billionaires to lose billions? Why would Russia invade California's economy when they too have lots of money invested in us and their billionaires would also lose money? No country has invaded another country and said to its billionaires, it's okay if you lose half your wealth. That's never happened. Never happened in history. Rich people always come out with a war. Never is there a country that invades another country and goes, look, half of our billionaires are going to lose on this, but we're doing it anyways. That never happens. So why would a country invade us if they're going to make themselves poor and cause an automatic recession? That's what happens when you invade countries you're directly linked to. That's why Iraq was cut off from the economy. So was Syria and Afghanistan and Libya and Vietnam. And they're trying to do it with Russia and Iran. There's a pattern here. And North Korea. So if you're super well linked, they frankly can't invade you because they all want money and they recognize their military power is based upon money. Additionally, 60% of the goods come through us. So if they invaded us, they'd lose 90% of the fruits and vegetables for about a year. You'd cause starvation in America. And you lose about 60% of your goods. So you probably have people die because they couldn't get heart valves in certain medical facilities. If you and I are living in the same house and we start fighting with each other, guess what? Both of us are going to get hurt. There is no, I just landed blows on you and you never got one blow on me. We're in the same house. We're sharing the same bathroom, sink, shower. There is no, I hit him and he didn't hit me. That's not how it works. So can't happen. When we're looking at the military also, yeah, we'd be third largest overnight. Additionally, California already has an independent military that can't be federalized. There's only 3 states in America that have this. Most people don't know this. They were grandfathered in from the Civil War. So I think it's us in Indiana. We can have a military that's independent of the federal government. We already do. It's only got 5,000 troops. It's called the California State Guard, not the reserves. This is not the reserves. It's called the Cal State Guard. Fully independent of the feds, 5,000. If we transferred the $700 million that we put annually into the California National Guard into the Cal State Guard, we have the 7th largest military overnight, while still being a state in America. By the way, the state with the largest number of combat experienced troops, California. The state with the largest number of active duty service members across all 4 branches, California. The state with the largest number of reserve veterans who've seen combat, California. So if you really want to get rough, America is going to come and invade. Their economy is going to get destroyed. Their people are going to starve. And then they're going to go up against some of the best equipped, best trained American combat soldiers they've ever seen. Now, I think that's stupid. We want to do international trade. Nobody's talking about that. But if people want to play this game, just like people would say, well, America's going to cut off the Colorado River to Los Angeles. Okay, and we'll cut off 90% of the fruits and vegetables. We don't need water from America. We get more water than we need. 90% of our water goes to ag, and 80% of our ag is exported outside of us. We have more than enough water for the entire California population. What would happen is we'd stop exports, and then people in America would starve. We'd be fine. I think that's stupid and dumb, and we shouldn't do that. I'm just pointing that out so that people know it's not like you can just poke California and we can't poke back. We can poke back and it'll hurt too. So we want to be friends and we want to have an amicable divorce. If you don't want that, it's not like you can just poke us and we can't do anything. Sorry, when you're the world's 5th largest economy and you're this intricately linked for decades, it's impossible to do that. And global warfare of the last 60 years shows that.
You mentioned the term amicable divorce.
Yeah.
And, before we get into that, I just wanted to let you know in these last several minutes, because I want to respect your time as well.
We can go longer.
Sorry?
We can go longer. It's all good.
Well, I wanted to talk about high-speed rail. I don't think it's going to fit in this episode, but I would love to bring you back on to do a segment essentially on what an independent California would look like and what high-speed rail would look like in independent California, hypothetically.
Yeah.
If you're open to that, that'd be awesome if you could come back.
I'd love to do it. Just to give you a little tidbit, most congested air corridor between 2 metro areas on the entire planet, California, it's between LA and the Bay Area. That air corridor was developed in World War II. So it's basically a tube in the air between LA and San Francisco that goes over the coastal mountain ranges. It's set that way by the Department of Defense. Can't be reset. That thing's so congested, you have the highest chance of head-on, plane-on collision of any place on the planet. The only thing that can equal the speed of an airline is a high-speed train. So you're not going to be able to provide air transport for people between 2 of the world's top 10 metro places in the planet, and that's coming up very soon, and there's absolutely nothing you can do about that other than provide another transportation linkages. The only one available is high-speed rail. The population's going to grow, and we have to have our economies grow. There's no other way to do this. I'm here in the Central Valley. Absolutely nobody knows that. I can't tell you the number of people who criticize high-speed rail and go, do you know why they're doing it? They know absolutely nothing about the air corridor. They know absolutely nothing about air traffic. They know absolutely nothing. They're just like, it's stupid. It's a waste of money. Tell me about how we're going to keep our economy growing when we can't have people travel back and forth between 2 of the top 10 metro areas in the planet, and yet we're going to have a stable growing economy when our population is going to grow. They've never contemplated that question, and they've never even heard that. Secondly, a lot of the high-speed rail additional cost is because Hanford farmers sued to slow the project done after it was approved for a year and a half, raising the price on the thing. A lot of Republicans are completely unaware that it was Republicans who actually started raising the price on the cost of this. Completely ignorant about those 2 facts. I can cover it more in depth, but they almost know none of that. And I hear it all the time because I'm in transportation and I go, fact A, fact B, and you just, what? No, that can't be true. It's still a bad idea because that can't be true. Thirdly, the train was built in the valley because LA and the Bay Area already have transit systems that are going into the valley. LA's been building LA Light Rail. It goes up to Lancaster. It's damn close to going to Bakersfield on its own. Bay Area has BART system. It's almost all the way out to Tracy. Lancaster's damn close to Bakersfield. Tracy's in the valley. Jerry Brown knew that those 2 areas were going to have metro systems coming. And so if he just built one between the 2 of them, LA and the Bay would spend their own money, not state taxpayer money, to provide the linkage to the other thing. Again, almost all critics have absolutely no idea that that was the development strategy and that that's why Brown did it. So I find near total ignorance of people who are opposed to high-speed rail on those 3 critical facts. We can cover that more in depth if you want.
Absolutely. And I would love to talk about the traditional zoning and development pattern we see in the Central Valley and all around California, which in my view, aside from the topic of this episode, has really bankrupted the state and our cities because we refuse to believe that sprawling isn't working. It hasn't worked. It was a failed experiment in housing, and probably started for good intentions after World War II, trying to get as many homes built as possible. We see, though, that it's led to blight. It's led to so many miles of roads that cannot be fixed because we're trying to get other original roads fixed before we can do the new ones, right? And we'll go more in depth in another episode about that. Just wanted to wrap up with 2 questions. First, I want to know what message you have for Californians, for those in our state. What would you like them to know about the Calexit movement and why you're doing this?
Well, if California is independent, California will likely be the #1 economy in the world. Additionally, if you live in the ghetto or you live in one of the ghettos that I've mentioned, those are wiped out. They don't have to exist. They can be taken care of. Additionally, you're talking about the homeless issue here. In 2019, California lost $22 billion being a donor state. In 2022, we lost 72, and in 2024, we lost $82 billion. So it fluctuates wildly. $20 billion is more than it takes, according to experts, to permanently wipe out homelessness in the Bay Area region forever. Not for a year, forever, meaning it would never come back ever into the future for the entire Bay Area. We could have wiped out homelessness 7 years ago in 1 year based upon what we give to 35 states. If we waited another 3 more years, homelessness in Los Angeles would have been wiped out. So in just 4 years of being a donor state, that problem is completely eradicated. That's how much money we lose. And then we have to raise taxes on ourselves. So homelessness is gone. Poor education is gone. Poor roads is gone. Ghetto cities is gone. 2/3, 2 times more jobs, 2 times more income, 2 times more businesses coming back to us. Simply put, we're held back by America economically, period, in every way possible, and it's not good for us financially. Now, if you want to be part of America for reasons other than that, fine, but just tell yourself it's an economic loser, and it causes our children to have to live in the worst ghettos in America to be part of the U.S., and I'm totally okay with that. If you're willing to say that statement, great. I got nowhere to go. And then if you're also willing to say, I'm okay with undocumented people living in fear. I'm okay with women living in fear that their abortion rights are going to be taken away because they and their grandparents always thought that they would have this for the last 50 years. I'm okay with gay people being told you can't come into the store and buy things. I'm okay with transgender people being the first group to lose rights since Dred Scott. I'm okay with Muslims being told you're not really welcome in this country and we will ban you based upon your religion. I'm okay with discriminating against all these groups who come to California and find that this is the only place where you can provide freedom. That's why I started this whole show off on why am I here? Because Mexicans were treated like dogs in Texas. I can't tell you the number of gay men who cry when I tell them that story because they had a similar experience of escaping America and finding the only place they could be accepted was here in California. We're an ark. We keep people afloat. That is under threat. You can see it. I've already given graphic depictions of why I think we're in the crystal knocked. On top of that, it's ruinous for us economically. And additionally, all the obstacles against this aren't really obstacles. We have answers for everything. There's a good answer for everything. We're just not allowed to get it in the news. You were asking about borders. California already has border checkpoints at every single freeway with America. They're called Food and Agricultural Inspection Stations. They can stop every single vehicle and force you to submit to a search and seizure. And if they don't, they can shoot you. That's been legal for 40 years. We already have border control. We just need to literally slap a sign on it. Most people don't know about the Cal State Guard. Most people don't know that we could be the 7th largest military overnight. Most people don't know that we have the borders. Most people don't know that our governor and lieutenant governor have been saying, don't consider us part of America. There's an answer for everything. This is super easy, super doable. If you're not sure that, you just don't know. Thank you for the opportunity.
Absolutely. And last question. This one may be the most interesting to me, even though everything we talked about was very interesting and I'm learning a lot. I also have my own opinions. I have my own thoughts on all of this stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's come back.
I'd be happy to have you back. And last question I have for you is similarly to the last question. What is your message to Americans, the other 49 states? You mentioned an amicable divorce. People like Marjorie Taylor Greene called for a national divorce, right? You have people, just look at Facebook comment sections. You have people who rail against the state. In some ways, they have merit, and in other ways, it seems very out of proportion. What is your message to Americans who both are on both sides of the political spectrum, who hate California, but also those who love us, who love coming over here and love interacting with the people here, who love our food, who love the culture here, and who find comfort here? What is your message to those who, in your eyes, are just incompatible with us when it comes to sharing the union?
Well, first, Marjorie Taylor Greene borrowed our talking point. We were the first ones to come up with amicable divorce, or national divorce was the term that she popularized. If you look it up, we started that in 2018. So we're the first person documented in the media. She took that term from us, national divorce. Additionally, Marjorie Taylor Greene directly endorsed the Calexit initiative and said that Republicans should let them go, which is exactly what we were saying was going to happen. And she did it after we'd gone on TV saying Republicans are going to love this idea. So she's literally proving our point, has directly backed our initiative. And for the answer to this question, they view California as the primary cause of disruption in America. If you watch Fox News, Breitbart News, you're going to see Nancy Pelosi, Adam Schiff. You're going to see mostly Californians, Gavin Newsom, Maxine Waters. I have to see this all the time, comes here in the Valley. All the boogeymen are, except for Chuck Schumer out in New York, are all Californian. Basically all of them. Maybe AOC. So maybe 10 California boogeymen to 2 American boogeymen who aren't from California. That's all they've seen. Additionally, some of the most wildest ideas come out here. The people who were most enthusiastic for impeaching Trump were Californians. The people most on that board for impeaching him were Californians. That's why the Republican Party has these conventions where they say, we don't like you. That's why they did a survey saying you're not American. They view us as a problem. They view us as a disruption. They view us as a disruptor. They view us as bringing bad, horrible ideas that want to have their kids dye their hair pink and get something chopped off, or they can't have a job because they think we're the source of all the bad garbage ideas, and we force it on them. And they're kind of right. We have an outsized influence. We push a lot of the most radical extreme legislation. We try it here in California and say, see, it worked. Let's push this to the national level. So they're kind of correct about that. They would get a country back at peace. They would get a country that doesn't do crazy radical things that they think is going to literally destroy their livelihoods and their families. And they wouldn't have so much disruption and so much anger. Marjorie Taylor Greene was pushing for Calexit for the same reason we are. This country is already ripping itself apart. Period. End of story. It's going to get worse. Period. End of story. Having an amicable divorce prevents it from getting worse. My parents got divorced. I was sad as a child, but when you look at the fact that people were about to start punching each other in the face, maybe divorce is the best option. We don't have people stabbing each other, kicking each other, punching each other in the face, just crying. Okay, well, that's not fun, but that's way better than physical violence. I think we're closer to there. I'm sure you've seen the marriage rates. The marriage rates between people of opposite parties are the lowest they've been since the 1970s. So the number of people I will marry or date someone of the Republican Party, Democratic Party has precipitously dropped to the lowest rate it's been in 50 years. Additionally, you can look at the number of cloture motions in Washington, D.C. That means they don't have a debate. They just rush a vote because they can't have debates anymore. That's grown by 700%. You can look up filibuster use in the Senate, where they try to cut off discussion and move to a thing. That's grown by another 300%. You can look at the number of bills that Congress has passed. That's dropped by like 500% over the last 40 years. You can look at the amount of average American confidence in the federal government across all branches except military is the lowest it's been in about 45 years. I didn't make those happen. California didn't make that happen. The Congress is not functioning. They can't debate. They can't pass laws. They're fighting with each other. People are not marrying or dating each other across parties. There was the Virginia University poll a few years ago when Biden was still around. 78 and 80% of 78 of Biden voters view all Trump voters as, quote, an existential threat to America. 80% of all Biden voters are an existential threat to America. Existential threat to America is the language used for a Russian nuclear strike or an ISIS terror attack on New York City. And so you have Americans saying 80% of them view 80% of the other party as equivalent in danger to that. Then the FBI is talking about how domestic terrorist groups are now the number one threat, and they're looking at PTA associations. So the hard facts are there. This country is not working. It's not coming together. It's becoming more violent. There was an insurrection. A party walked back their condemnation of an insurrection. This is why I was talking to you earlier about, tell me what stable country this happens in. Tell me the stable country where these facts are happening in. It doesn't exist. So the metrics are there. Congress is least effective. Cloture, filibuster, number of laws passed, the amount of time that they spend debating, the number of joint resolutions. The first bipartisan resolution ever passed, I think in the last decade, was when Trump just won, and it was to ban transgender people. And they were saying that's the first piece of bipartisan legislation Congress has passed in a decade. That means failing. These aren't trends over 1 year. These are trends over 10, 15, 20, 40 years. Pew Research statistics, hard stats, everything's going down, not working. You got to go back to the George W. Bush era to find out when it started going bad, way before Trump. And the 200 college professors of political science that I've interviewed all say that. Didn't start with Trump. Some of them say Obama, some of them Bush. You got to go back 10 to 20 years if you want to start undoing this problem. And so it's decades building. The hard stats are there. California didn't make that. And we think Marjorie Taylor Greene's correct. This country is about to rip itself apart. And an amicable divorce where we prevent each other from punching each other in the face, in the mouth, is way better amongst all the options we have. I think if you watched an insurrection and you watched a party walk back the condemnation of the insurrection, and you watched the speech by Joe Biden where he was at night with Marines and blood red lighting backdrop, and he says basically everybody in the MAGA movement is a threat to America. You've never had a president say half of the other party is just a threat to the entire country. That's never happened in U.S. history, ever. I think maybe the 1860s. So all of that is really, really, really bad. Very bad. Been going on for decades. By the way, nobody has a way to fix it. I talked to all the professors. They can't even agree on what the cause of division is, and they can't even agree on what the solution is. And when you get them into a corner on here's the cause and here's the solution, do you think this will work? Every single one of them said, I hope. We're facing civil war. You're the top expert on political division, and you hope your solution works? I'm supposed to have faith in that system? My God, if I had kids, that's a good, reasonable decision for me. Why don't I put my investment in here and expect everything's going to work out for my kids? That's dumb. Don't be the dog with the coffee mug and the wall on fire. Wake up. You're in history now. It's real. Stephen Miller, right? You and I are both. The vice president said, I hate you guys. He's talking about you and me. That's not normal. That's not okay. That's not standard. That's the kind of stuff that happens in a country before people start shooting each other. That's fact. I'll leave it there.
Yeah, well, thank you for this interview. Although I have hope for things to settle down and for us to get back to some type of baseline, this interview and hearing this perspective that I frankly don't hear anywhere. You mentioned that news outlets, traditional ones and newspapers, they don't cover the fact that this could be on the ballot in 2028. So this information really adds to my repertoire so I can make a better informed decision if this does appear on the ballot. I think all of us agree that no one wants violence. We just want to have a safe place to raise our families, to engage in commerce, to enjoy ourselves, to enjoy life. And it really is up to everyone who watches this for you to figure out what's best for California, what's best for the nation, what's best for the future that seems very just so far away right now, but also precarious. I would love to have you on again, whether
Absolutely.
it's an update to talk about high-speed rail and urban planning, because we both really enjoy that topic, right? And we were mentioning earlier that the way we design our cities and the way we design our urban and rural landscapes makes or breaks entire economies. And that in itself is a whole can of worms that I would love to get into. But I think this is very valuable information, and I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful. I may be naive. I may be too optimistic, but I think that you sharing your view and your perspective, and just having a platform so you can really let people know what Calexit truly is, whether they agree with it or not, really does help. It really does help in kind of bringing down the tension a little bit, and then letting people know that it's not because I hate anyone necessarily. It's because I think this may be good for everyone. And again, I have my own opinions. I have my own positions on this, and I don't feel the need to share those because I'm not really trying to convince anyone of anything, just getting them information that I think is pertinent to them, especially now in a time that seems so precarious, like I said, and so divisive. Where can people find more about the Calexit movement? My understanding is you're still collecting signatures for this to be on the 2028 ballot, correct?
Yeah, calexitnow.org, 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 calexitnow.org. You can go to the website. You can put in your contact information. We will email you the petition and instructions. We also got articles on why this is a good idea. We've also launched a cryptocurrency to fund this. We have donation tabs. We have merch tabs recently launched, and we will be announcing a tour across California with stops at every major metro on that page too. calexitnow.org. Get a hold of all of us there, and we'll answer any questions. Once you put your email in, you're going to be given some information. You can also email us directly once through that, and we are very responsive. And for you, sprawl didn't have to happen. We had something called the Blue Line. It was a transit system. It was in the Bay Area here in Fresno, in downtown, and in the Valley. It provided rides for everybody. They ripped it up to put in roads because the American tire and oil industry wanted it that way. So it was because of corporate America. They ruined the transit system and put in the system designed for sprawl, and it never had to happen, and it was for corporate greed. We can cover that next time.
Absolutely. And just to add to that, because I love this stuff. Fresno actually had one of the largest electric trolley systems on the West Coast. Valley cities were meant to look and operate very differently than we do now. They were meant to compete with cities in Italy, in France, the south of France, right? In all these places. And our obsession with, in my opinion, our obsession with cars and car development and replacing historic buildings. I mean, just look at what Fresno looked like in 1910, right?
Mariposa Street.
Oh my God, it was beautiful. There was such unique architecture, and that's how Valley cities were supposed to be. My hometown of Lindsay, right? Everything was built very mixed use. That was the original intent of what we were doing, and we were supposed to become our independent, self-reliant, complete economies. That's what we were supposed to do. But as we said before, the suburban experiment failed, and we think that we're doing things right by building mass developments of walled-in single-family homes, not understanding the economic impact that has on our downtowns, on the fact that we're not even creating walkable spaces. There's no third spaces. We're not engaging in small business commerce. It really forces people to get in from one structure, their house, into another structure, their car, with no engagement socially, into a drive-through in a large corporation, right? I enjoy a Starbucks every now and then, and sure, it's nice and stuff, but it really prevents people from engaging in local commerce and a healthy form of capitalism that I feel was the intent all along. So we can definitely go into more in depth about that, and I think having people hear your position on Calexit and also other very important issues would really humanize this discussion and make it less polarizing. Because if people said, well, Marcus, he sounds crazy with all this independent stuff, but you know what? It would help out the city of Bakersfield, for example, to kind of change some zoning laws or whatever. People could engage with you in that. And aside from very stark differences between your beliefs and theirs, the reality is that there are still things that we have in common, and I would love for people to know that about you and know that about others who we've been trained to think of as enemies, right? So I really appreciate you coming on, and let's do this again.
I'm a Valley boy, yeah, and we can talk. Absolutely, absolutely,
Absolutely, yeah. The city of Lindsay, my hometown, very proud of it. We've had extremely incredible people in the last several city councils, and there's been so much talk about downtown revitalization, rezoning, and we're seeing all this stuff happen in the Central Valley. We're seeing a lot of the reimagining of what we could do, and I think it's because we have to believe and see things a certain way out of necessity here. This isn't the Bay Area. This isn't even Sacramento. This is not LA. We have our own issues that are pressing down on us very hard. So we do have to think out of the box. So if whoever's listening to this, understand that places like Bakersfield, Visalia, even Hanford, Fresno, Lindsay, Porterville, all these places, they're prime areas for investment. They really are. And I don't understand why they have not been discovered yet. And people really need to understand that there's so much policy that's changing here, from removing parking requirements to removing red tape so developers can come in a little bit easier while still respecting environmental laws, right? So just wanted to throw that out there. That's my little soapbox. And
it's warm here. That's why, we get some people from LA and the Bay who move here, but typically it's the summers, which is the major draw off. But to back up everything you're saying, the Valley's the last place in California that's actually allowed to grow. So there's basically no more room to grow in the Southern Cal Metro, Sacramento, or Bay Area. So if you want any sort of growth, it's here. That's why you're seeing some of the warehousing here and some of the other stuff. We're the last place in Cali where you can actually build roads and grow things, and the environmental regulations aren't so onerous that it can't stop. So anybody from LA to San Francisco who wants anything new developed is basically looking at us.
We have downtowns ripe for investment, everyone. So thank you again. Really appreciate it. We'll have you back on soon. And this has been Founders Frequency Podcast.